The marble lobby gleamed like it had never been touched by real hands. Glass walls rose 3 stories high. Stainless steel turned every movement into a reflection. A fountain whispered money into the air. And in the center of it all, a security guard stood chest out, palm raised, blocking an old man like he was an inconvenience someone forgot to throw away. "Sir," the guard said, loud enough to perform for the crowd, "this floor is restricted." The old man didn't flinch. He wore a charcoal suit that looked like it had been pressed by habit, not by staff. A plain black tie, a silver watch, modest and scratched. His hands were calm at his sides, steady hands, working hands. His hair was mostly gray, cropped close, and his face carried the kind of lines you earned by surviving decades that didn't want you to. Deep creases around the eyes, a soft scar near the jawline. Dignity, worn in. He looked past the guard to the elevators, where a digital screen flashed. Board meeting, level 42, 9 a.m. It was 8:57. Behind the guard, a woman in a tailored navy suit approached quickly on heels sharp enough to cut. Her badge swung as she walked, catching the light. Executive operations. She didn't look at the old man's face at first. She looked at his shoes, then his tie, like she was scanning for excuses. "Is there a problem?" she asked the guard. But her eyes landed on the old man. The guard puffed a little more, grateful for backup. "He's trying to go up." The woman's mouth tightened. She turned to the old man with the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "Sir," she said, slower now, "do you have an appointment?" The old man's voice was low and even. "I'm expected." The woman's smile flickered, as if she'd heard that line too many times. "By who?" He didn't bristle, didn't raise his tone. He simply repeated, "I'm expected." The woman exhaled, impatient. She turned slightly, just enough to let nearby bystanders see she was in control. People had begun to slow as they walked through the lobby. Some stood near the coffee bar pretending to browse pastries. Phones started to rise. A young man in a branded hoodie held his device up like a microphone. The red dot of a live stream glowed on his screen. His whisper carried, "Yo, this is happening right now. They are really doing this." The old man noticed the phone, and still, he didn't react. The woman's voice sharpened. "This is a private facility. We have very strict protocols. If you can't provide..." A second security guard arrived, taller, with a radio clipped to his shoulder and the confidence of someone who'd never once been doubted in a space like this. "What's going on?" he asked. His refusing to show credentials, the first guard said. The old man finally looked at the woman directly. His eyes were dark, clear, and exhausted in a way that wasn't weakness. It was the exhaustion of someone who'd spent a lifetime being asked to prove he was allowed to breathe. "I'm not refusing," he said softly. "I'm waiting for someone to recognize what they should have checked before they put hands in front of my face." The woman's cheeks flushed. "Sir," she snapped, "don't make this difficult. They are clients, investors, press. If you're lost, I can have someone escort you out." "Escort," the second guard repeated, like it tasted good. The lobby grew quieter. Even the fountain sounded like it was listening. A janitor pushing a cart slowed to a stop. A receptionist behind the glass desk glanced up, eyes wide, then quickly looked back down like she'd been trained to survive by not seeing. Someone whispered, "His old man." Someone else whispered, "He shouldn't be up there anyway." The old man's shoulders rose and fell with a controlled breath. The woman stepped closer, lowering her voice as if kindness was a private favor. "Let's not do this publicly. Show me your badge, or we will have to remove you." Remove. A word that carried history on its back. The old man's gaze drifted to the revolving doors where sunlight spilled in, bright and indifferent. His reflection stewed in the glass like a question nobody wanted to answer. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I'm here to attend my meeting." The woman's patience snapped like a thread. "Okay," she said, turning to the guards. "Call it in. We can't have people wandering into executive flaws. If he resists, we involve police." The hoodie guy's live stream camera zoomed in. Comments began to roll so fast the words blurred, little digital sparks feeding a growing fire. A phone ringtone went off somewhere. No one answered it. No one dared break the moment. The old man didn't move. The guards approached, and for the first time, the tension in the air shifted from embarrassment to danger. The old man's voice stayed calm, almost tender. "Before you touch me," he said, "you might want to look at the name on the meeting agenda." The woman scoffed. "What? You think we don't?" He leaned slightly toward the reception desk and nodded once, as if to an unseen ally. "Ask them," he said. The receptionist froze behind the glass like prey. The woman snapped her fingers at her. "Do you know him?" The receptionist swallowed hard. Her hands trembled as she typed something. The lobby held its breath. Then the receptionist's eyes widened, and the color drained from her face. The old man didn't smile. He only said, almost to himself, "Now." And the word hung there like the first drop before a storm. "We can do this the easy way, or the way you chose." At 5:12 a.m., the city was still half asleep. Streetlights hum-dimmed over wet pavement. Delivery trucks sighed at loading docks. A lone jogger passed a man sitting on a bench with a thermos in his hands, watching the sunrise like it owed him an apology. He wore a simple wool coat. No entourage, no driver waiting at the curb. His name was Malcolm Grant. To most of the world, it would have sounded familiar in a distant way, like a name you'd seen on a plaque and never bothered to read. To the market, it was a force. He had built Grant Hale's systems from nothing but a rented room and a second-hand calculator when the banks refused him loans. He had coded through nights where the heat didn't work and the neighbors fought loud enough to shake his focus loose. He had pitched his first product to men who stared at his hands instead of his face, men who asked where the real founder was, men who offered him advice like it was charity. He had swallowed rage more times than he could count, because sometimes survival required silence. But he had never, not once, confused silence for surrender. At 6:30 a.m., Malcolm sat at his kitchen table, reading a printed board packet the way he always had. Paper, pen, notes in the margins. His handwriting was neat, the strokes firm. In the living room, an old photo sat in a frame. A younger Malcolm standing beside a woman with a radiant smile. Her hand rested on his shoulder like a promise. Nadine, the love of his life, gone 7 years now. Cancer didn't care about legacy. When she got sick, Malcolm missed meetings for the first time in his career. Not because business allowed it, because love demanded it. The board never forgave him for remembering he was human. He remembered the day after her funeral, when one director called him and said, "We need to talk about transition planning." Transition, as if grief was a weakness to exploit, as if a black man's tenderness was a liability. He had listened. He had nodded. He had hung up. Then he had spent 2 months quietly acquiring more voting rights through a trust he controlled. Legal, transparent, strategic. Not because he craved power, because he knew what happened when you let people who never believed in you decide when your story ended. That morning, Malcolm buttoned his cufflinks himself. He washed his hands in the mirror. Hands that had carried groceries up 5 flights of stairs. Hands that had held a newborn daughter, now grown, now running a non-profit that fed families in neighborhoods the city only remembered during election season. Hands that had signed contracts that saved thousands of jobs during recessions. Hands that had written checks to fund scholarships no one knew came from him. He didn't need applause. He didn't need statues. He needed the company to remember its soul. And today, it wouldn't be a meeting. It would be a reckoning. As he stepped out into the morning air, his phone buzzed. A message from his assistant, one of the few who still treated him like a man, not an obstacle. Agenda confirmed. Items 3 and 4 will be contentious. Security has been briefed to expect a disruption. He stated the words for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Let them." He put the phone in his pocket, adjusted his tie, and walked toward a building that bore his name in small letters near the base. Letters people stopped seeing once they got used to the view. He arrived without spectacle, just a man and his purpose. And the city, indifferent as ever, kept moving. The receptionist's fingers hovered over the keyboard like she was afraid the keys might bite. The woman in navy leaned in, voice sharp. "Say something." The receptionist's throat bobbed as she swallowed. I'm checking." Malcolm stood still, calm as a lighthouse in a storm. The guards looked at each other, unsure now. The second guard's hand drifted toward his radio but didn't press it. The hoodie livestream guy shifted closer, his voice a whisper that still carried to thousands. "Chat, they might be about to call cops on this elder. Look at his face. He's not even scared." Comments exploded. Hearts floated up the screen like confetti. A man in a suit near the coffee bar stepped forward. He said to the woman, maybe we should just. She cut him off with a glare. "This is not your concern." Another bystander spoke, a woman holding a tablet. He said as expected, "Why not just verify?" "Because," the woman snapped, "we don't negotiate security protocols in the lobby like it's a sidewalk." Her eyes landed on Malcolm again, contempt disguised as professionalism. "Sir," she said, loud now, "last warning. Provide identification and authorization, or you will be removed." Removed again. The second guard stepped closer. His voice dropped, rough. "We can do this easy." Malcolm's gaze didn't leave the elevators. "Easy for who?" he asked quietly. The woman's jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous." She turned and gestured to the guards with a flick of her hand, like shooing away a mess. "Escort him out. If he refuses, restrain him." A sharp inhale moved through the bystanders like wind through dry grass. A phone somewhere clicked. Someone started recording on a different app, a higher quality lens. Another phone rose. Then another. The lobby became a forest of screens. Malcolm finally spoke, his voice steady and clear, carrying without force. "You're about to put your hands on me in front of a live audience," he said, "because you didn't do your job." The woman scoffed. "My job is to protect this company." Malcolm's eyes sharpened. "No," he said, and the word landed like a gavel. "Your job is to protect your idea of who belongs inside it." The woman's face flashed with anger. "That's enough," she hissed. "You're trying to make this about race." "I didn't make it anything," Malcolm replied. "You did. The moment you looked at me and decided I was a threat instead of a person." The crowd murmured. Someone in the back whispered, "She's cooked." The hoodie livestream guy spoke louder now, narrating. "They're about to do something crazy, y'all. They're about to." The guards reached for Malcolm. The second guard's fingers touched Malcolm's sleeve. Malcolm didn't pull away. He simply turned his head slightly and looked at the guard's hand like it was a choice being made out loud. The guard hesitated. "You sure?" Malcolm asked him, soft as a warning. The guard's eyes flicked to the woman for direction. She nodded sharply. "Do it." The guard tightened his grip, and the lobby's air changed. Not because Malcolm panicked, because people felt it. The moment you realize you're watching history repeat itself. A young receptionist behind the desk whispered something into her headset, voice trembling. We need someone from legal down here now." The woman in navy didn't hear it, or didn't want to. She leaned forward and hissed at Malcolm, venom disguised as policy. "Do you know how humiliating it is," she said, "to have someone like you disrupt an executive morning? Do you know what kind of people are going upstairs?" Malcolm looked at her gently. "I do," he said. Then he added, quieter, "I used to clean their offices." That sentence cracked something open in the room. The woman blinked, thrown off balance for half a second, then recovered, sneering. "You're not going upstairs," she said. "Not today. Not ever." The hoodie livestream camera caught Malcolm's face in close-up, and in his eyes, there was no anger. There was something older, something like patience reaching its limit. Malcolm spoke one final time, still calm. "Then you'll have to explain to the board," he said, "why you just barred the largest voting shareholder from entering his own meeting." Silence hit the lobby like a blackout. The woman froze. The guard's grip loosened without him realizing. The receptionist behind the desk looked like she might faint. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Did he just?" The hoodie livestream guy's voice cracked. "Yo, chat," he said as the largest shareholder. The woman in navy laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That is not funny," she said. "Stop lying." Malcolm didn't answer her. He took a slow breath. Then he lifted his hand, not sudden, not threatening, just enough to pull a folded paper from his inside pocket. A printed agenda. He held it out toward the receptionist's glass wall. "Read the third item," he said. The receptionist's eyes darted to the paper, then to her screen, then to Malcolm. She whispered, barely audible, "Oh my God." The woman barked, "What?" The receptionist looked up, tears forming. "Item 3, she said, voice shaking, is a vote to remove 3 board members for breach of fiduciary duty." The woman's face stiffened. "That has nothing." The receptionist swallowed hard. "And item 4, she continued, is an emergency motion to appoint a new chair." The woman's lips parted. The guard's hand fell away from Malcolm's sleeve like it had been burned. Malcolm's voice was quiet. "It starts at 9, he said, glancing at the clock. "We're 2 minutes late." And somewhere above them, the elevator chimed. The elevator doors slid open with a whisper. A man stepped out wearing a tailored suit and the exhausted urgency of someone who'd been running through hallways with consequences on his heels. He was flanked by a woman clutching a folder stamped with the word confidential and a younger aide carrying a tablet. The man's eyes scanned the lobby, landed on Malcolm, and widened. He stopped short like he'd hit an invisible wall. "Mr. Grant," he said, breathless. The sound of that name, said with respect, with recognition, rippled through the crowd like electricity. The woman in navy turned slowly. "Who is that?" she demanded, but her voice had lost its edge. The man's face tightened in disbelief that he even had to answer. "That," he said, "is Malcolm Grant. Founder, former CEO, current controlling shareholder." And he looked at the folder in his colleague's hands as if it suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. "And as of 8:45 this morning," he added, voice lowering, "appointed interim chair pending today's vote." The lobby didn't just go silent. It emptied of sound, like the world had muted itself to hear the moment better. A phone clattered to the floor somewhere. No one moved to pick it up. The hoodie livestream guy stopped talking entirely. His camera stayed up, but his mouth hung open, stunned. Malcolm stood as he always had. Still, calm, present. The woman in navy's face drained. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she stammered, That can't be." The man cut her off. "It is." He turned to Malcolm, voice trembling with apology and fear. "Sir, I'm so sorry. We were told there might be." Malcolm lifted a hand gently. "Don't," he said. "Not you." His gaze moved to the guards. The first guard looked like he wanted to vanish into the marble. The second guard's eyes were fixed on the sleeve he'd grabbed, as if he could still feel the wrongness of it in his fingertips. Malcolm's eyes then turned to the woman in navy. She looked smaller now, as if the building itself had rejected her. Malcolm spoke softly, and because he didn't shout, every syllable hit harder. "You threatened to have me arrested," he said, "in the lobby of the company I built." The woman's throat worked. "I didn't know." "No," Malcolm corrected gently. "You didn't check, because you didn't think you had to." He stepped toward the elevators. No one blocked him now. People actually moved out of his path, instinctively, reverently, like the air made room for him. The man in the suit hurried beside him. "The board is already seated," he said. "There's tension. They thought you weren't coming." Malcolm's eyes remained forward. "They hoped," he said. As he entered the elevator, Malcolm turned back once. The lobby was a frozen tableau, faces caught in shame, shock, fascination. Dozens of phones held the moment captive. The hoodie livestream guy finally found his voice, whispering like he was afraid volume might break the spell. "Chat, this is real. This is the founder." Malcolm looked directly into the nearest camera for one heartbeat. Not as a performance, as a witness. Then the elevator doors closed, and the last thing the lobby saw before he disappeared upward was Malcolm's face, calm, unbroken, like a storm that didn't need to rage to destroy what was in its way. Upstairs, on level 42, the boardroom had been designed to intimidate. A table long enough to make distance feel like power. Leather chairs that creaked like old money. A wall of glass showing the city below like a kingdom. The board members sat in a row of polished confidence. Until the doors opened. Malcolm stepped in. The room stiffened. A few members stood abruptly, startled like they'd seen a ghost. Others didn't stand at all. Too proud, too arrogant, too practiced in pretending. The current chair, a man with silver hair and a smile full of strategy, forced a laugh. "Malcolm," he said, "we didn't expect you. We were told there was an issue with my presence." Malcolm asked, voice mild. The chair's smile faltered. "With security." Malcolm moved to the head of the table without asking permission. He didn't slam papers. He didn't throw accusations like knives. He simply placed a folder down, opened it, and looked around the room as if he was taking attendance at a place he owned. "Item 3, he said, "is now Item 1. A murmur ran through the room. One director, young, ambitious, leaned forward. "This is highly irregular." Malcolm's eyes met his. "So was the attempt to remove me from my own company while my wife was dying," he said quietly. That shut the young director's mouth. Malcolm continued. "Legal," he said, nodding to the woman who entered behind him. "Please read the findings." The woman cleared her throat and began. "Breach of fiduciary duty. Conflicts of interest. Self-dealing contracts. A private vendor owned by a board member's brother. Consulting fees that had no paper trail. An email chain where someone wrote, 'He's old. He'll step down soon. We just have to press.'" As each line was read, faces tightened. Someone's hand shook as they lifted a glass of water. Malcolm didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He watched them the way a parent watches a child caught in a lie. Sad more than angry. The vote came. The first director tried to argue procedure. Then Malcolm slid a document across the table, an executed proxy statement. The company's bylaws highlighted. A majority voting bloc held by Malcolm's trust. Undeniable. The room surrendered to reality. One by one, 3 board members were removed. Not in a dramatic fistfight. In the quiet, brutal way power changes hands when paperwork is sharper than a blade. Within hours, news broke. First on social media, because the lobby video had already exploded. The livestream clip was everywhere. Elderly black man nearly removed by security, revealed as founder and controlling shareholder. People stitched the clip into commentary. They slowed the audio. They zoomed in on the woman in navy. They replayed the word remove like it was a confession. By noon, major outlets were calling it a public corporate reckoning. By close of market, Grant Hale's stock dipped, not from Malcolm's return, but from the allegations and the removals. Investors hate uncertainty, but they hate corruption more. An internal investigation was announced that same evening. The woman in navy was placed on administrative leave pending review. The guards were reassigned, then interviewed, then offered training and counseling, because Malcolm demanded it. He insisted the system be examined, not just the faces caught inside it. Still, consequences came. The chair resigned before sunset, claiming personal reasons. A lie everyone understood. Lawsuits followed, shareholders filing, former directors scrambling, lawyers sharpening. And in the middle of the storm, Malcolm returned to his office. Not the new, gleaming suite the board had renovated for other people. His original office, a smaller room on the executive floor that still held a framed photo of Nadine. Someone had never taken it down. He sat in the chair. He placed his hands on the desk. And for the first time all day, his calm cracked just enough for a whisper to escape. "I'm here," he murmured, eyes on the photo. "Like I promised." 3 days later, Malcolm stood in the company auditorium. A stage, bright lights, a sea of employees, engineers, assistants, security staff, cleaners, interns, people who kept the machine alive. Cameras lined the back wall. Reporters sat with pens ready. The livestream count climbed into the hundreds of thousands. The lobby video played briefly on the screens. Gasps spread through the room like fresh grief. Then the footage froze on Malcolm's face, calm, dignified, right before the elevator doors shut. The room fell quiet. Malcolm stepped to the podium. He didn't grip it like he needed support. He stood like someone who had already survived worse than microphones. When he spoke, his voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I want to start by saying something simple," he began. "I'm not here to punish people for being human. I'm here to hold people accountable for choosing not to be." He let the words settle. "I watched that video," he continued, "and I saw an old man being treated like a problem. I saw people stay. I saw phones rise. I saw that familiar hesitation in the room, where everyone waits to see what the powerful will allow. A murmur moved through the crowd. Malcolm's eyes scanned the room. "I've been that man before," he said. "Not because I lack talent, not because I lack discipline, but because this country has a habit, especially in spaces like this, of asking certain people to prove they belong, even when they built the room." He paused. "And I want to be very clear," he said, voice tightening with emotion he refused to turn into rage. "This is not just about me. It's about the thousands of quiet moments that don't get filmed. The receptionist who is ignored. The custodian who is assumed invisible. The brilliant engineer whose idea gets repeated by someone else and suddenly becomes valuable." He leaned slightly toward the microphone. "Bias isn't always a slur," he said. "Sometimes it's a policy applied with a different face in mind. Sometimes it's a smile that hides a suspicion. Sometimes it's the confidence to be wrong about someone, because you've never paid a price for being wrong." You could hear breathing in the auditorium. Malcolm's eyes shone briefly, and he blinked it away. "I don't want anyone fired just so we can feel like we fixed something," he said. "I want us to build a place where nobody has to be publicly humiliated before they are treated with basic dignity." He straightened. "So here's what we're going to do," Malcolm said. "We are going to audit our culture the way we audit our finances. We will measure who gets opportunities. We will measure who gets heard. We will measure who gets stopped in the lobby and why." He let out a long breath. "And we will remember something," he said, voice softening. "This company is not marble floors. It's not glass walls. It's not a logo. It's people. It's every person who shows up and gives their hours, their minds, their bodies, their patience." He held up his hand, palm open. "My father used to tell me," Malcolm said, "that dignity is not a gift someone gives you. It's a decision you make about yourself." But he pointed gently toward the audience. "A decent society makes it easier for people to keep that decision." He looked toward the cameras at the back. "If you saw that video," he said, "and you felt angry, good. Anger can be a signal. But don't let it end at outrage. Let it become a question you ask yourself the next time you stand in a room with someone who doesn't look like what you expect." He paused, then delivered the line that spread across the internet within hours. "Because the most dangerous thing in any building isn't the person you don't recognize." He looked straight ahead. "It's the person who thinks recognition is a requirement for respect." The auditorium erupted, not in wild cheering, but in something heavier. People stood. Some clapped with tears on their faces. Some clapped like they were apologizing. And Malcolm, at the podium, bowed his head, not for praise, for the weight of what should never have needed a speech. 7 months passed. The lobby changed. Not the marble, not the glass, the posture. New training wasn't a checkbox. It was a culture shift, reinforced by policy and leadership presence. Security staff learned to verify without humiliating, to question without threatening, to protect without profiling. A new sign appeared behind the reception desk. "Respect is our first protocol." The company created a transparency dashboard employees could access, promotion data, pay equity reports, complaint resolution timelines. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. A board seat was reserved for an employee-elected representative. The nonprofit Malcolm's Daughter ran partnered with Grant Hale to fund scholarships and apprenticeships, paid ones, with real paths to leadership. The woman in Navy didn't disappear into nothing. She resigned before the investigation concluded, then attempted a public apology that sounded like public relations. It didn't land. Later, a smaller story emerged. She'd been raised in a world where power meant never being questioned. She'd learned fear and called it standards. She'd learned suspicion and called it protocol. She wasn't redeemed in a neat montage, but she wasn't turned into a cartoon villain either. She was what systems produce, until someone forces the system to look in a mirror. Malcolm returned as chair long enough to stabilize the company, restructure governance, and place a new CEO, one chosen for competence and character, not comfort. On his last day as chair, he walked the lobby again. This time, a guard greeted him with a nod and a warm "Good morning, Mr. Grant." No performance, no fee, Just simple respect. Malcolm paused near the fountain. A young intern stood nearby, clutching a badge and looking overwhelmed. She glanced at Malcolm, then at the gleaming ceiling, then back down at her shoes as if she wasn't sure she belonged. Malcolm stepped closer gently. "First week?" he asked. She startled. "Yes, sir." He smiled, small and real. "They're going to try to make you feel small sometimes," he said. "Don't help them." Her eyes widened. How do I not?" Malcolm's gaze softened. "Walk like you're carrying someone's future," he said. "Because you are. Yours." The intern nodded slowly, like she'd been handed something precious. Malcolm adjusted his coat and turned toward the revolving doors. Outside, the city kept moving, bright, loud, indifferent. But inside that building, a different kind of movement had begun. Not perfect, not finished, but real. If you had been standing in that lobby, watching an elderly man being told he didn't belong, watching authority tighten around him while phones rose to record, would you have stayed silent, or would you have stepped forward before the world forced the truth into the light?